In the long, dark winter of 1943, with the world holding its breath, the architects of liberation gathered. They did not meet in war rooms bright with the promise of assault, but in shadowed basements, in quiet libraries, under the pall of London smoke. They were not generals of the line, not admirals of the fleet. They were men of mathematics, of theatre. They were illusionists, crossword puzzle masters, and cartographers of the human mind. Their task was not to build an army, but to build its shadow. To forge a lie so vast, so detailed, and so utterly believable that an entire continent might be saved by its echo. This was the birth of Bodyguard, a name chosen with a grim, bureaucratic irony, for this operation was not meant to protect one man, but to sacrifice thousands by deceiving millions. The problem was simple, and it was impossible. Across the grey, churning water of the English Channel lay Fortress Europe, a beast of concrete, steel, and wire, guarded by 1,000,000 men, half mad with paranoia, waiting for the inevitable storm. The Atlantic Wall, not just a defense, but a psychology. It was built on the German High Command certainty. The invasion would come at the shortest crossing, the Pas-de-Calais, where the chalk cliffs of Dover nearly touched the shores of France. It was logical, it was efficient, it was sane, and therefore it was the one place the Allies could not go. The target had to be Normandy. Its wide, sloping beaches, its vulnerable tides, its distance from the industrial heart of the Reich. It was a gamble of insane proportions. To succeed, the German 15th Army, the powerful armored fist waiting in Calais, must be held in place. They must be made to stare at the wrong piece of coastline, convinced the real attack was yet to come, even as the beaches of Normandy ran red. To fool an army, you must first fool its commanders. To fool its commanders, you must understand their fears. And the German High Command feared one man above all others. A swaggering, pearl-handled spectre. George S. Patton. Patton was in disgrace. Sidelined in Sicily for striking a soldier, he was a lion in a cage, prowling the periphery of the war. The Allies knew this. The Germans knew this. And the illusionists in London knew that a disgraced genius is the most terrifying kind. He was the perfect star for their imaginary play. And so, in the wet, green fields of East Anglia and Kent, a phantom was given form. The 1st United States Army Group, FUSAG. It began with sound, the hiss of compressed air. In the pre-dawn mist, men who should have been training for war were instead inflating a new kind of weapon. The rubber Sherman, the canvas and wood landing craft. From the air, at 10,000 feet, a dummy tank glistening with morning dew looks identical to one coated in steel and oil. Squadrons of phony P-51s, made of plywood, sat parked wing to wing on hastily built airfields. Barracks were constructed, mess halls built, telephone lines strung, all of it empty. A stage set for an audience of one, the high-altitude reconnaissance pilot of the Luftwaffe. But an army is not just metal. An army is noise. It is chaos. It is the friction of 1,000,000 lives grinding against each other. Operation Quicksilver was the sound of the ghost. From transmitters hidden across southeastern England, a torrent of radio chatter flooded the ether. Thousands of signals using the unique fist, the specific rhythm of a real radio operator, copied from units now secretly moving toward the west, toward Normandy. They broadcasted encrypted, meaningless data, supply requests for bootlaces in Dover, artillery coordination for guns that did not exist, leave schedules for divisions of phantoms. They created the sound of an army preparing, the mundane, boring, utterly convincing noise of logistics. And to lead this ghost army, they sent Patton. He arrived with all the subtlety of a thunderclap. He was visible. He gave speeches to civic groups, inspected his inflatable divisions, his voice booming across the empty fields. He was the bogeyman the Germans expected, precisely where they expected him to be. The German intelligence officers, listening in, ticked their boxes. Patton, Calais. The logic was confirmed. The trap was not a cage. It was a mirror, reflecting their own assumptions back at them. But the Phantom Army in Kent was only the centerpiece. The grand lie of Bodyguard was a symphony, and Fusag was merely the brass section. The deception had to be global. It had to stretch the German mind to the breaking point. In Scotland, Operation Sky was born. Dummy battleships, created by the shipyards of Harland and Wolff, bobbed in the harbours. Radio traffic for a British Fourth Army crackled across the North Sea. The target? Norway. Hitler was obsessed with Norway. He saw it as the zone of destiny, the birthplace of Aryan mythology, and more practically, the source of his iron ore. He believed, with the unshakable faith of a zealot, that the Allies would strike there. The illusionists in London simply fed his paranoia. They gave him ghosts to fight in the fjords. He kept 250,000 men garrisoned in the ice, waiting for an invasion of radio signals, men who would be desperately needed in France. To the south, Operation Zeppelin. In the Mediterranean, the Allies staged a massive buildup of dummy landing craft in Egyptian ports. They simulated the movements of 3 full army groups. They leaked false plans to Turkish officials, suggesting an imminent invasion of Greece and the Balkans. Field Marshal Rommel, the Desert Fox, had pleaded for his divisions in France to be reinforced from the east. He was denied. Those divisions were held fast, watching the Mediterranean, waiting for a mirage to land in Crete. The German war machine was being stretched thin, not by force, but by imagination. Yet, the most powerful illusions were not made of rubber or wire. They were made of flesh. The War of the Spies. The double-cross system, the XX Committee, was perhaps the single greatest intelligence coup in modern history. The British had, by 1944, captured or turned every single German agent operating on their soil. Not one was executed. They were too valuable. They were the most trusted voices whispering into the ear of the Abwehr. And the greatest of them all was Garbo, Juan Puyol Garcia, a Spanish chicken farmer who so despised fascism that he had, on his own, decided to become a spy for Britain. Rejected by the British, he traveled to Lisbon, convinced the Germans he was a committed Nazi, and began inventing a spy network in England, while still living in Portugal. He fabricated reports from maps, timetables, and his own wild imagination. His reports were so compelling, the British finally realized their mistake and brought him to London. Garbo was an artist. He was a novelist of espionage. He created a network of 27 fictional subagents, a Welsh nationalist in the Navy, a disaffected officer, a gossiping ministry clerk. He gave them code names, personalities, weaknesses, and strengths. He even killed one of them when he failed a mission, providing a heartbreakingly detailed report of his death that earned Garbo sympathy from his German handlers. He was Fusag's voice. He was the man on the ground. When the Luftwaffe failed to spot the inflatable tanks, Garbo's agents confirmed their existence. When the radio chatter subsided, Garbo reported on the massive fuel dumps being hidden in Kent. He sent thousands of messages, a constant, reliable stream of truth confirming the Calais narrative. The Germans trusted him so implicitly, they stopped trying to send new agents to Britain. Garbo, they said, already had it covered. They paid him hundreds of thousands of pounds to fund his imaginary network. They even awarded him the Iron Cross. There were others. Brutus, a Polish officer, and Tricycle, a double-dealing Serb. Each one a thread in the tapestry. Each one feeding the same consistent lie. Patton, Calais, the real invasion. As the spring of 1S944 bled into summer, the tension in England became unbearable. The south of the country was a sealed camp. The roads were choked with real tanks, real men, real ships, all heading west toward the embarkation ports for Normandy. The secret was too big. It was a bubble of reality floating in an ocean of deception. The German commanders in France could feel it. The air was electric. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the old Prussian aristocrat, was pragmatic. He believed the landings would be a feint, followed by the main thrust. But Rommel, having seen Allied air power firsthand in Africa, was desperate. He raced up and down the coast, planting millions of mines, the devil's asparagus in the fields, the metal hedgehogs on the beaches. He knew the battle would be won or lost on the sand. He did not know which beach. The illusionists had one final, terrible card to play: the bombing campaign. If the Allies were really landing at Calais, they would be bombing the bridges, railways, and command centers leading to Calais. So, they did. For every 1 ton of bombs dropped on the infrastructure of Normandy, 2 tons were dropped on the Pas-de-Calais. An intricate mathematical formula of death. Allied pilots died. French civilians died. All to make the lie more convincing. The deception was now being written in blood and rubble. Then the weather. A storm in the Channel. June 5th. The invasion was on hold. The anxiety in Eisenhower's headquarters at Southwick House was a physical weight. But in France, the storm was a relief. To the Germans, it proved no invasion was possible. Their patrols were stood down. Key officers, including Rommel himself, took the opportunity for leave. Rommel drove to Germany to give his wife a pair of shoes for her birthday. The commander of the 7th Army, responsible for Normandy, was at a war game simulation in Rennes. The fortress was half asleep. In the dead of night, Eisenhower made the call. "Okay, let's go." The final deception began. As the paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne dropped into the darkness behind the Normandy lines, the Allies unleashed the ghosts. Operation Titanic. Small groups of SAS commandos parachuted far to the south, firing weapons, playing recordings of battle noise to draw German reserves away. Simultaneously, hundreds of Ruperts, dummy paratroopers made of burlap, set to explode with pyrotechnics on landing, were dropped over the Pas-de-Calais. German reports flooded the 15th Army headquarters, paratroopers everywhere. Then the sea. The real fleet, 6,000 ships, was approaching Normandy, shielded by a wall of radio silence. But to the east, a different fleet set sail, Operation Glimmer. Small boats towed giant radar-reflecting balloons. RAF planes flew in precise, tight circles, dropping window, aluminum chaff, in sequenced bursts. On the German radar screens in Calais, it was terrifying. The window strips simulated the radar echo of a massive invasion fleet. The boats simulated the transports. The radar operators screamed into their telephones, "The fleet is here! They are approaching Calais!" The 19-inch guns of the Calais batteries opened up, firing for hours into the empty, fog-shrouded channel, shelling phantoms. When the first reports of shells landing in Normandy arrived, the German High Command laughed. A diversion, just as Garbo had predicted. A small-scale raid to draw their attention from the real assault. At Hitler's headquarters at Berchtesgaden, the atmosphere was calm. The Führer was asleep. No one dared wake him. When he finally rose, late in the morning, and was told of the Normandy landings, he was ecstatic. "It's begun!" he shouted, "exactly as we expected." He was convinced this was the feint. He ordered the panzer divisions to hold. Wait for Patton. Wait for Calais. This was the moment. The pivot point of the war. On the beaches of Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword, the world was ending. Men drowned in the surf, cut down by machine gun fire, vaporized by mortars. They were fighting and dying against fortified positions, against men who had been waiting for them. But they were fighting only the men who were there. They were not fighting the 15th Army. They were not fighting the elite panzer divisions held in reserve. The lie was holding. For days, the illusion continued. For weeks. The beachhead at Normandy was a fragile, bloody chaos. The battle for Caen was a meat grinder. The Allied commanders pleaded for reinforcements. And still, the Germans waited. Garbo was the key. His German handlers were frantic. What is happening? On June 9th, 3 days after the landings, Garbo sent his masterpiece. It was a long, emotional message. He reported that his agents had met. They confirmed Normandy was a diversion. The real attack by Patton's million-man Fusag was still being prepared. The Normandy landings were a sacrifice, designed to draw German reserves away from Calais, so that Patton's real invasion would have an easier time. He pleaded with them, "Do not move your men from Calais." It was the most brilliant psychological trick of all. He told them their refusal to reinforce Normandy was exactly what the Allies wanted them to do. It was a perfect Escher-like trap. To counter the Allied plan, they must not counter the Normandy invasion. And so they sat. The German 15th Army, one of the most powerful forces in the Reich, sat in the Pas-de-Calais for 7 long weeks. They waited for an army of rubber and air. They waited for Patton. They waited for the ghosts. By the time the German High Command realized the truth, that the diversion in Normandy was, in fact, the greatest amphibious assault in human history, that the Pas-de-Calais was a sideshow, it was too late. The breakout had begun. Patton, his phantom army dissolved, was now in France, real and terrible, his Third Army a steel spear plunging toward Paris. The illusion had served its purpose. It evaporated, like the mist it was born from. The inflatable tanks were deflated, the plywood planes packed away. The radio operators of Quicksilver fell silent. Garbo sent his last message, reporting that his network had been compromised, and then he too disappeared into the silence. The war was won by courage. It was won by steel, by sacrifice, by the unimaginable bravery of the men who stepped out of the landing craft into the fire. But that courage was given a chance, a sliver of possibility, by a war fought in the shadows, by men who understood that the most powerful weapon is not a bomb, but a story whispered across the ether, built from canvas and lies, and aimed at the one vulnerability that all empires possess, their own certainty. The fields of Kent are quiet now. The beaches of Normandy are scarred only by memory. But the static still whispers, just beyond the range of hearing, a testament to the grand, terrible, and beautiful illusion that saved the world. The ghosts had done their work, and the silence they left behind was the sound of freedom, breathing its first ragged breath.